Today, we're zeroing in on one single event that really put the BRICS nations to the test. It was a moment that, on one hand, showed some surprising unity, but on the other, revealed these deep, deep fractures hiding just beneath the surface. And it all kicked off with this one number, 50%. Now, back in September 2025, this single figure was enough to trigger a global economic shockwave and force an emergency summit. So what exactly is it? Yep, you guessed it. This was a tariff, a massive one, imposed by the United States that basically lit the fuse. And on September 8th, 2025, the BRICS nations scrambled to hold an emergency meeting. Look, this was way more than just a trade squabble. This was a full-blown geopolitical stress test. All right, let's get into it. So first things first, we've got to understand what actually kicked off this whole crisis. It was a move from Washington that the BRICS bloc saw as, well, a direct challenge to their economic sovereignty. And man, things moved fast. In early September 2025, the U.S. hit two of the bloc's heavyweights. We're talking Brazil and India, with those staggering 50% tariffs. The response was pretty much immediate. Brazil's President Lula got on the phone and called for an emergency summit. You have to understand, holding a meeting outside their normal yearly schedule, that alone tells you just how serious they thought this threat was. President Lula didn't waste a second. He came out and framed this in purely political terms, not economic ones. He flat out called it tariff blackmail and even linked the move to U.S. support for his political rival, Jair Bolsonaro. He was essentially telling the whole world, hey, this isn't about trade, this is political retaliation. This is the weaponization of trade. So with all this pressure mounting, you might think the group would start to show some cracks, right? Well, not at first. Their initial reaction was actually this remarkable display of solidarity. For a moment, they really did speak with one voice. The language they used was almost perfectly in sync. China's President Xi Jinping, for instance, came out swinging. He didn't mince words at all, accusing the U.S. of unleashing trade wars that were hurting the entire global economy. It was a clear, unified message of condemnation. And it didn't stop there. South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa echoed that exact same sentiment. He really honed in on the damage these unilateral moves were doing to developing nations, arguing that they were creating this protectionist environment that hits the global South the hardest. So what's the big takeaway here? They absolutely seized the moment. They presented this united ideological front against what they saw as unilateral U.S. action. And in doing so, they positioned themselves as the champions, the defenders of the established, rules-based global trading system. But here's where the story gets a whole lot more complicated. Because underneath that polished, unified surface, the summit exposed some pretty profound fractures running right through the heart of the BRICS bloc. And what was the single biggest sign that things weren't as rosy as they seemed? No joint statement. I mean, this is a huge deal. For a group that almost always ends these big meetings with a lengthy declaration, the silence was deafening. It basically proved they could all agree on the problem, but they had no idea how to agree on a solution. And the core of that disagreement? It really all came down to the fiery debate over de-dollarization. On one side, you had Brazil's President Lula, who was pushing hard for a new BRICS trade currency to challenge the US dollar. And on the other side, you had India's spokesperson stating in no uncertain terms that de-dollarization was not part of India's financial agenda. I mean, you really can't get a clearer, more direct strategic split than that. And this table right here really pulls back the curtain on that complex reality. Yeah, they all condemn the tariffs, but their proposed solutions were just all over the map. Brazil wants a new currency, China's pushing its own global initiatives, India's focused on supply chains. It's like they were all reading from completely different playbooks. And speaking of India, they made this subtle but really powerful diplomatic move. Prime Minister Modi didn't actually attend the summit himself. He sent his foreign minister instead. Now, this was widely seen as a very calculated decision. It was a way to participate and show solidarity without directly antagonizing the United States. It just perfectly underscores India's constant, tricky balancing act between its BRICS partners and the West. All right, so we've got unity on one hand and deep, deep divisions on the other. What in the world does this paradox actually tell us about the future of BRICS and its role on the world stage? Well, ironically, what happened is something analysts are calling the rebound effect. The U.S. action, which, might have been intended to fracture the group, actually did the exact opposite. It gave these really diverse nations a powerful common cause to rally around. It forced them to coordinate politically more than they had in years. This whole crisis basically put BRICS in front of a mirror and forced it to ask itself, what are we really? Are we just a talking shop, a loose economic bloc, or are we a genuine counterweight to the West? And the answer that came back is, well, it's complicated. On one hand, the summit proved BRICS can respond incredibly fast and speak with a powerful, unified voice for the global South. But, and this is a huge but, it also showed that those deep internal divisions, especially between giants like India and China, stop it from acting like a real unified military or economic alliance. And that's the core paradox. U.S. pressure seems to forge a stronger political group, even while its members are pulling in totally different economic directions. And all of this leaves us with one final, massive question. This emergency summit proved that the voice of BRICS is louder and more coordinated than ever before, no doubt about it. But it also put those internal rivalries on full display, and those rivalries ultimately define the limits of the bloc's power. So can a bloc of rivals truly reshape the world order? That remains one of the great geopolitical questions of our time.